Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy Nyer, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC. I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with this, the Virginia SBDC is the largest and most effective provider of customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in 29 different locations throughout the Commonwealth. Today's webinar is one of our educational offerings and is part of our ongoing webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's topic is writing well for Google and humans. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, web and mobile strategist, author of Solo Most Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting, a digital business strategy and training firm that helps business owners learn why and how to use the web, mobile, and digital technologies for greater marketing and management impact. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here on the Beyond Google Marketing and Managing on the Web series. And as Tracy said, we're going to be talking about writing well for Google and humans today. And so just a bit of housekeeping, as Tracy said, you have the question panel there in the webinar tool. Feel free to ask questions now. That's what we're here for. And of course, if you have questions afterward, the easiest way to reach me is probably by Twitter. And you can go ahead and follow us at W3 Consulting, hashtag it Beyond Google, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. If you are not Twitter friendly, don't worry about it. I will show my email address on the final slide, and you can go ahead and shoot me an email if you have questions and are not, capable of doing that via Twitter, especially if it's long or complicated or private. And of course, go ahead and follow at Virginia SBDC so that you can go ahead and pay attention to new programs and other webinars that we have going on the series and the great information that the Virginia SBDC puts out on a regular basis. So today, our agenda is actually to cover some guidelines for effective writing, and this is for writing for online, because that's what the series is about. So we'll be talking about effective writing for online. We'll be talking about some writing and editing tools that I think are really useful for small business, and then we'll go ahead and talk about writing for search engines, the writing for Google side of things, right? So I say Google as the umbrella term for all of the major search engines and little search engines that live underneath them, but Google is one of the 5 major search engines in the world and drives most of the traffic around here. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to what Google wants in terms of that. So we'll talk about that today. And then finally, we'll do question and answer. We'll leave some time for Q&A. We may run over time just because there's a lot of material to cover, but for those of you who have to drop off at the hour, no problem, but we'll stay to answer any questions that you might have. So let's jump right into it, which is that effective writing is really about getting your audience to a place, right? And as we contextualize all of this, the first thing that I have to really convey here is that, when we talk about search engine optimization and writing for Google and all these other things, we have to remember that you have to write for humans first. At the end of the day, you can get all the traffic you want to your website, but if the text on your page is absolute rubbish, you're not going to be able to effectively communicate what you want and get people to do what you want. That's just the end of it, right? So you need to make sure that you have the end in mind, which is that eventually, if you write well for Google, you also have to be writing well for the humans. Because if there's a heart and mind at the other end of the computer or mobile device, they need to be affected as much as Google needs to see that this content is relevant and useful and to direct that traffic from the search engine search to your website, okay? So just first and foremost, write for humans first, and this comes down to the fact that you need to think about calls to action. All of your writing needs to have a call to action. If you're not calling to people to action, then why write it, right? And this is not always going to be buy now, buy from me, but you need to tell people what they need to do. Okay, so call people to action. Tell them explicitly what to do, and they'll remarkably do it. If it makes sense for them, they'll do it. So you really don't have to worry so much about motivating people as giving them clear direction. So make sure your writing is for the humans first, and making sure that they have calls for action. So at this point, I'd like to just cover some of the general guidelines that I typically talk about in my seminars for people about how to write well for online and for just effective writing in general. Okay, so we're going to go through these one by one. If you have questions, pop in. Tracy will interrupt me. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. So let's start out with my favorite of them all, which is writing that bad first draft, okay? And this comes from the work of Anne Lamott. She's a writer and workshop trainer herself in helping people how to write better. And she wrote a book called Bird by Bird, and it's about writing and some life stuff, and she is a very, very funny writer. And what I thought I'd do was just read the opening passage to her talking about the concept of the bad first draft, and she calls it a different word, and if you Google it, you can see what she really calls it, but I'm just going to call it the bad or the terrible first draft. But here's Anne Lamott talking about the terrible first draft. Now, practically even better news than that of short assignments is the idea of blank first drafts. You can fill in the blank of what she says. All good writers write them. This is how they end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. People tend to look at successful writers who are getting their books published and maybe even doing well financially and think that they sit down at their desks every morning feeling like $1 million, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what a great story they have to tell. That they take in a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their necks a few times to get all the cricks out, and dive in, typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. But this is just the fantasy of the uninitiated. I know some very great writers, writers you love who write beautifully and have made a great deal of money, and not one of them sits down routinely feeling wildly enthusiastic and confident. Not one of them writes elegant first drafts. All right, one of them does, but we don't like her very much. We do not think she has a rich inner life or that God likes her or can even stand her. Although, when I mentioned this to my priest friend Tom, he said you can safely assume you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all the same people you do. End quote. So as you can see, Anne Lamott is talking about this idea that we all sit down with this perfectionist mentality when it comes to our writing, especially when it's writing that's going to be so public, that's going to be online. And as she sort of humoristically quips, the reality is that if we don't write that first bad draft, then we'll never get to getting to the editing process. So really what I encourage you all is that the first guideline to effective writing is to write that bad first draft. Get it all out. Just start writing. Start somewhere. Start anywhere. It's better than not writing at all. Okay, and so this leads to sort of the sort of underlying principle, which is that good writing comes from good editing. Learning how to edit well is the number one effective writing tool you have in your bag. And so the next couple of items that I'll be talking about in sort of guidelines for effective writing is going to be about this idea of looking at your writing and being able to edit it well, because once you've written that bad first draft, it's pretty simple to then start cleaning it up. You can even start to create a checklist for yourself of the things that you do frequently that are poor writing, and you can just start to correct them that much faster. Okay, so write that bad first draft and then get to editing. Okay, get it all out and then start editing. I sometimes like to have other people draft bad first drafts for me in the company so that I can see just something, anything. And many times the final product of what they write is nowhere near, maybe not even a single original word from what was first written. But because there was just something to work from, it was better than nothing. I hope that makes sense. Is there a question, Tracy?
There is not.
All right, we're going to move on. If there's a question, just go ahead and interrupt me. So next is the concept of readers' attention today.
Ray, we do now have a question. In today's world,
sure. Go for it.
Visuals seem to be king, photos, videos. If that's true, what role do words have in inspiring action?
That's a great question, and while visual, our visual and auditory attentional systems in our brains are some of the most powerful attention-grabbing pieces of our worlds, today's webinar is not going to be really focused on audio and visual, attention. What I would say is that no matter what, deep learning, deep understanding happens from words. They don't necessarily always happen from purely visual. Okay, so every video, or audio is based on the words that are said. You can communicate a lot with just pretty pictures and some nice music, but the reality is that the words, the things that we say, are what communicate deep knowledge. And deep knowledge is what speaks to hearts and minds, okay? So we have to really think about the words that we're using more than we have to think about the visuals and those kinds of things, okay? But just keeping context today of words only, we'll have future webinars where we'll be talking about audio and video communication and how that all plays out in both the marketing side of things and how those work in the communication sides of things internally in your business. Okay, so I appreciate the question, but today's purview is really within the idea of writing. Okay, so next up, I wanted to talk about our attention. When we are reading today on computers and mobile devices and so on and so forth, it becomes very, very difficult for us to pay a lot of attention to a lot of words, okay? Now, there's a bit of a dichotomy here. There's a bit of a hypocrisy here because it turns out that really long reads online are some of the most shared writing pieces out there. Those tend to be, though, from very, very popular sort of celebrity people, not necessarily from general writers, just general business people. So don't worry too much about the really long reads. What we want to do is to write really economically so that our readers' attentions are grabbed and moved forward. What that means is that shorter sentences are better, and that also means that making sure that we are grabbing our readers' attention out the gate so that they're engaged in the material. Okay, and that means there's a little bit of shock and awe that we have to use, and being inspirational in the words that we use sometimes to be able to do that. And that's sometimes difficult, but you start to learn it with time. But you do have to be economical. You don't have to write lots of lofty, phrasing, prose that goes on for miles. As I'll talk about in the SEO section, you're supposed to be writing really short passages, okay, not very long pieces. So, if you're going to write a longer piece, that's great. Break it up into multiple small pieces, and that way people can digest those in smaller chunks and therefore not be overwhelmed or just get bored because they're walking down the street and they have to walk into a meeting and they're not going to come back to actually finish the writing piece that you wrote. Okay, so it's all about being economical with what you're getting in front of people. So how do you be short, sweet, and succinct, and then communicate on that level? All right. So think about sort of the elevator pitch, right? You get in the elevator, you're going from the first to the third floor. You've got that minute to a minute and a half to tell that person, if that much time, to tell that person what you're trying to convey. That should be what you fit into a paragraph. Then you move to the next paragraph, and then you move to the next paragraph. But just sort of how radio producers think about keeping people's attention in, by audio for just the next 5 seconds and then the next 5 seconds, you sort of have to think about that with the paragraph in mind. Be economical in how you structure your paragraphs so that you're capable of driving the person to want to read that next sentence, and then that next paragraph, and then the next paragraph, and then call them to action. You see what I mean? All right, so keep that economy of words in mind. Don't get lofty for the sake of it. It really won't benefit you, okay? And that doesn't mean that you have to have, just going back to the bad first draft concept, right? If your bad first draft is super lofty and you write, 1,000 words, that's okay. You can delete them. There's nothing wrong with deleting words, okay? You can write as much as you want in that bad first draft, but then you can start to cut away until it's just clean, clear prose that moves the person forward through it, okay? So just be aware of that. Next up is the active voice. One of the big things that I see people do is that they write in the passive voice. And so really you need to make sure that your subjects are affecting things, right? So we're talking about a little bit, to get a little bit, I don't want to get too complicated, but the idea here is that you want to make sure that you are doing things to objects, right? You want to make sure that I picked up the book, right? Not the book was picked up by me, right? That's a very sort of weak sentence because it's all in the passive voice. So we really want to always look at that as being, how can we consistently move the sentence structure to being in the active voice, all right? And you can do this in passages. Just write what you're going to write in that bad first draft, and then go back and notice everything that's being done to the subject. If all of a sudden something's being done to the subject and the subject's not doing the action, is not doing the thing that it's supposed to be doing, swap the sentence around so that now you or it, whatever the subject is now doing the action. All right? So, the general rule is just everything should be in the active voice. I mean, unless it really doesn't play well with the overall tone of what you're trying to do, or if there's something really out of whack, okay, maybe, and then you become sort of you start to deal with stylistic choices. But I have seen, I don't know, in many years of editing, I've seen very few circumstances where the passive voice was the appropriate voice for business writing. All of your writing should really be in the active voice, okay? If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer those. Okay, this goes back to my second point about being economical to keeping the reader's attention, but this is a little bit different. Writing simply just means not to use language that your audience will not understand. Okay, so I frequently talk about this in seminars, which is that when I'm on my mobile phone, or anyone is on their mobile phone, they get literally an IQ hit. They literally are dumber for it. That is, our attention is being grabbed by many different things. If we're on a mobile phone, we may be walking on the street, we may be, I hope not driving, but you may be, in some kind of transit. Even if you're sitting at your desk and you're on your mobile phone, you probably have other things going on, like your computer screen is active and it has things going on. When we have our mobile phones in our hands, which is where a predominant amount of stuff is read today, we are distracted, which means that we're just not as sharp when it comes to pulling out the salient points within text. Okay? So what we have to do is we have to step back and we have to think, how do we affect our readers? How do we get people to really be moved by what we're writing? And that is, don't complicate things, right? If you use the word use instead of utilize, right? Same word, but one syllable versus three, right? How do we get these words that, supercalifragilistic expialidocious kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Like all of those big words that we don't need to use. We could just say it was a great day, and not get into the complications of things. So everywhere where you use a word, I don't know what they call them. They used to call them SAT words. But but if you start using SAT words instead of just writing plainly and simply for people, you're going to lose them. Okay? There's something called the Flesch reading scale, and you can go ahead and look this up. And a lot of web tools actually have these built into them, and it will tell you your Flesch reading scale score. And what that does is it tells you how complicated and at what reading level you should be writing for. And just about at an 8th grade level is what you should be writing for. Okay? So if you find a Flesch reading scale tool online, which I'll be talking about some of them as we make our way through today, you'll be able to see that if you're writing above that 8th grade level, you start to lose people, okay? And I know that I'm actually really guilty of this, so don't think that I'm speaking from some higher ground. I have to consistently keep eliminating terms that I'm like, okay, this is business or technical jargon, especially since I write about technology all the time, and business management. I have to continually take it down a notch and say, okay, this is just more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, so just write more simply.
Ray, can
Yes.
you spell flash? It's hard to understand what you're saying. As far as the scale, how is it spelled?
Oh, yes, it's Flesch, and it's Flesch. SCH.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So the Flesch reading scale, and I think his name is Robert Flesch, but either way, if you look it up, you'll be able to find the reading scale, and there are several tools online that utilize it. Okay, and so in the final portion of our discussion of guidelines for effective writing, it's really important for there to be subject, verb, and tense agreement. No matter how many times I look at my own writing, there's always room for improvement here, which is that when you have a sentence where you start in the first person singular, and you end up with a verb that goes ahead and doesn't have an S, because you're just not thinking, you're just sort of getting things out there. Make sure that I move, not I moves, or just making sure that you have them in the right tense, and that the subject and verbs agree. And this is not just on the single sentence. This is on sentence to sentence, right? So you don't go from the present tense to the past tense from one sentence to the next. They need to all stay in the same tense, in the same mood, okay? Now, there are some circumstances where you may have to sort of play with your sort of initial prepositional phrases to be able to keep yourself in the present tense. For example, if you talk about something that happened in the past, but you're staying in the present tense in a particular paragraph, you could say yesterday, and then comma, and then go on in the first tense to sort of play with it. But you really want to stay in the same tense throughout the course of each paragraph. You can change tenses between paragraphs if it makes sense, okay? But really, stay in the same time period. Don't go from past to present to future all in the same paragraph. It's very confusing for the reader, and it turns people off, okay? Because as soon as you don't know when things happened, you get very confused, and the first point of distraction is getting complexity involved to overwhelm the executive system, okay, our what we call, the cognitive executive system in our brains. As soon as you do that to someone, they shut off and they start to become confused, and that means they miss details, which means that they don't want to pay attention to your writing, which means they go ahead and leave. They just bounce. They basically, leave your website, and they go on to something that's going to be simpler, okay? So make sure that your subjects and your verbs agree with one another. If there are multiple subject, it's a plural subject, it should be a plural verb. If it's a past tense, situation, all the sentences in the paragraph should be in the past tense. It's pretty simple, right? So a lot of people don't know what some of these parts are. So I just want to cover very quickly something that you might have learned in grade school in sentence diagramming, but it's called SWAMPed, and the idea is subject, verb, object, manner, place, and time. And I wanted to go over what these things are so that you're just capable of looking at your sentences a little bit more critically and constructively, okay? So forgive the grade school lesson here, but I think it's a good refresher for all of us to consistently remember what the fundamentals are of a sentence structure, okay? Now, all sentences don't need to be in this exact format, but generally, if you have a question about where things fall, things will read better by utilizing this sort of this model, okay? So I'm just giving this sentence. I gave the book to him quietly in the library today. It flows well. It's an adequate sentence. First up, we have the subject, I, you, me, she, he, whatever, okay? So subject. Next you have the verb. The verb can be transitive or intransitive, right? That's the difference between something that does something to something, a direct object, or does not have to be doing something in order to have a direct object, right? So I ran, completely intransitive. I'm doing the thing myself, and I'm not doing it to anything other than myself, right? But in this case, gave is transitive. I gave the book. The book is the direct object in which I'm doing something to, okay? Next up is objects, right? We have direct objects and indirect objects. In this particular case, book is the direct object. I gave the book to him. He's an indirect object. He's not the thing I'm doing it to, okay? So I'm giving the book to him. Next up, we have manner. Manner are typically adverbs or in some cases adjectives, okay? But the manner in which I gave him the book, I could have said here rudely, I could have said curtly, quietly, here's what I said, I could have said happily. But the point is how did I give him that book? Did I give him that book in some other way? Now, just a quick point on adverbs. They're typically not needed. And I say that knowing that I use adverbs all the time, except that they're typically not needed. So just remember that you actually dilute, and this is a William Zinsser concept, the gentleman who wrote On Writing Well. And he talks about how we sort of dilute our writing by adding all of these adverbs in that aren't necessary, okay? Many times we write adverbs in as a crutch instead of utilizing the adverb as the actual verb, okay? So if there were a better way for me to have said this sentence, in terms of giving the book, is there a better verb than to give when you give someone a book quietly, okay? If I were saying that, let me take the example, if I gave him the book rudely in the library today, I could have said, instead of using that adverb, I threw the book at him in the library today. Now, one implies that it's already rude to throw books at people. I wouldn't have needed gave the book to him rudely, because I've been economical with my words. And that's really what I'm talking about when we talk about economy of words. We're talking about really thinking about how you're structuring the verbs and the manner of how you're displaying those verbs with adverbs and so forth in order to be able to make a sentence more effective and more economical. Okay? Next up, we have place and time. In the library is the place, so place comes before time. All right, so we have I gave the book to him quietly. Where? In the library. When? Today. Okay, and that's time. I could have said in the morning, or this morning, or tomorrow. I'm sorry, I couldn't say tomorrow, but any time in the past, right? So that's just subject, verb, object, manner, place, and time, right? Swamped. So if you can just remember swamped, you can then remember where do things fall in the sentence to make them more effective? Great. The manner, place, and time goes in those orders, and it's pretty simple to remember, and I really like using it even in my editing today. Okay. Any questions so far before we move on to overview of tools?
No questions so far,
Good.
Ray.
Great. All right. So then we're going to talk about some tools that I like utilizing, and I don't want to spend too much time on them because then I have to jump over to the discussion on search engine optimization of your writing. But let's talk about some of the tools because some of them are really fun and interesting. These are all going to be some are free and some are fee-based, and so you'll have to decide on it based on looking at these options. But for the most part, they're all pretty much the best options that I've found out there for being able to write and edit, okay? So first and foremost is an application called Grammarly. And Grammarly is fantastic because they have a series of products, a series of tools that allow you to be able to quickly proofread and instantly check for a number of different things. So Grammarly does proofreading, and what they do is they're capable of looking at style, stylistic problems, spelling errors. They actually check for plagiarism, and just in case there's a false positive of something. Many of us are writing every day. We read a lot of material, and then sometimes we misremember our own thoughts for someone else's, and so we want to make sure that we're writing original content, and that's one way to do that. Grammarly does a great job of looking at all of those and make sure that you're writing original content, and it does obviously grammar checking to make sure that you have that subject, verb, and tense agreement, between sentences and paragraphs. Really, really some powerful stuff here, and it does it in an instant. I mean, it just, it takes the information in, it quickly looks at it, and spits out a response in terms of these are the areas where you need to, clean up, these are suggestions, and this is how you can come out with an effective document or an effective piece or whatever. I think that you can use this for email communication. Imagine the email situations where something was misconstrued because of miswriting it, not paying attention to how you actually crafted that email. Grammarly does a great job of being able to just auto-check those things and gives you back a response that's really effective. So I'm not going to go to Grammarly. It's nothing fancy, and other than being able to paste text in, and they have some plugins to be able to use in other products. And like I said, this is fee-based. It's a couple bucks a month, I think $5 or $10 a month, and maybe more than that. I'm not quite sure. But the point is you have to pay for it every month, and I've found it full well worth it. I mean, it's really great at being able to take a lot of text and quickly look at it for that first round draft of edits and then the final round. So what I like to do with Grammarly is I like to put, as I'm writing for clients, I will put it in the first time around and it'll spit out results. I can clean those up, then go into the editing process, collaborate with a client, fully clean up the text, and then we run it through again at the end. And that way we've caught it on both sides. We've done sort of the easy stuff up front, gone in and cleaned it up and made it as best as we can, and then we get it on the back end to make sure that there's a plagiarism check, and if we missed any grammar, if we missed any spelling, if we missed any sentence structure stuff, it goes ahead and at least points it out. And if we've changed something stylistically and we decided, yeah, we're going to put time before place or time and place and invert the sentence for applying importance to one particular prepositional phrase or something like that, go for it. We're going to do it, and we're going to ignore what Grammarly says, but we're doing that with an informed perspective. Okay, so Grammarly is a great tool for that. All right, next up is Google, and so people frequently forget that or don't know that Google has a bunch of tools built into it that allow you to be able to find information out about your own writing. So I'm just going to give you an example here. One is that Google lets you go ahead and define things. So I can type in define and almost any word in any language, and it'll go ahead and define that for me. So if I type in the word conflate, Google will go ahead and it will say, hey, this is the word you have conflate. It defines it and so on and so forth, and gives me an ability to pronounce it for me. It gives me the type of word that it is and some synonyms associated with it. It can give you antonyms also. You can see some more information about it. You can see word origin and some other trends of usage over time. But it's a really, really easy way to just pull up a dictionary definition of it and go ahead and jump into it. So you can see here that it gives you origin. It's a Latin word, and how it sort of developed from its original Latin roots to its current ones. So really, really powerful, tool for being able to just quickly and easily pull up information. So I really like it, and so just type in define and any word, and you can go ahead and do that. But the other side to this is you can frequently have a, what's the difference between, its and its, right? And lo and behold, most likely Grammar Girl is going to come up or somebody like that. But here you can see that it tells you immediately what's the difference between its and its, and it just pulls it up. It gives you that quick feedback of what the answer is you're looking for, and just like there, and there, or two, those kinds of things, two, and two. What are the difference between those? Or, is it this or that? When do you use whom? As like all of those kinds of things. If you just type it into Google, someone has an answer for you for those kinds of questions. I use Google all the time for some, sometimes esoteric, because that's where my brain goes, grammar issues, where you're just like, oh, you know what? Where did that word come from? What's the etymology of those things, or, whatever words you're sort of looking up. It's a fantastic tool. So use Google for what it has in terms of the search engine's ability to pull up all of these articles, and it'll give you lots of great writing tips just from within the tool itself. Okay, so that's Google. And then next up, there is a fantastic tool that was recently bought, it was bought last year, by Intel. It's called Ginger, and it's built by Ginger Software, now owned by Intel. And Ginger Software, again, I'm not going to show you around the tool because it would just take too much time, but the Ginger Software is pretty cool. What it does is it has a series of applications. On the Android platform, it actually has a keyboard instead of sort of going to the app and having to paste text in. You literally use it as a keyboard that you enable within in the Android platform, and as you type, it's providing you with all the suggestions for fixing the sentences that you're writing. So it's actually doing it all live in real time for you. Really, really fantastic. And of course, it has email plugin. Not of course, but it does have an email plugin so that you can embed it within your email software or in your browser, that is, and it will go ahead and analyze your email to tell you, hey, by the way, these need to be fixed and that needs to be fixed right within your email. It has its own standalone applications, for the mobile phones, and I think it also has some connectivity to Word and LibreOffice and so on and so forth. So really, really cool tool. And again, it does very similar things to Grammarly in the sense that it'll do proofreading, it'll do plagiarism check, it'll do grammar, style, tone, all those kinds of things. So it's capable of looking at them in real time to give you that feedback, and I found it to be a very competent tool. I don't use it as my primary tool, but I know a lot of people who do use it and really do enjoy using Ginger. So I don't know what Intel's plans are for it. They bought them. From my understanding, they haven't done anything with the tool yet, so it's just been running sort of independently within the Intel ecosystem, but I'm sure that they have more plans for Ginger as it moves along, and I hope that they keep it alive and well. So that's Ginger. Next up, I wanted to walk you through Google's own product for sort of editing and so forth, which is built inside of Google Docs. So Google has added a couple of things that are really phenomenal for you being able to just quickly and easily write better right from within Google Docs. So I'm going to take you over to a blank document, and I thought I had set this to auto hide. It is on auto hide. There we go. I'm just in a blank document here, and we can just write whatever we want in here. But Google has done a couple of things to help you write better. One of the things that some people do well, which is they write better through just talking it out. Right? So if you're trying to write that bad first draft, I really recommend that you sort of talk it out. And Google's given you the ability to do so recently with something called voice typing. Okay? So what you do here is you just go to Tools and you drop down. So you have to go to Google Docs. You have to have a Google account in order to do that, which you can get for free or through Google Apps for Work. And so if you go open up a new doc in docs.google.com, you can go down to Tools and then click on Voice Typing. Voice Typing will open up this new little screen, and what will happen is once I activate it just by clicking on it, Google Docs will now start tracking everything I say and will be typing it live as I say it, period, new paragraph. So Google is capable of not only tracking everything I say and typing it, but it's also looking at the words to see if there's anything wrong with them at the same time. That's what those dotted underlined words are. It either didn't know what I was saying, or it had a question about why I said it, period. So there it is. It's highly accurate. As you can see, I don't think it got a single word that I said wrong, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So you can write a lot of text very, very quickly just by having it dictate what you're saying. Okay, really fantastic tool. So now, once I've written my bad first draft, now I want to go ahead and look at it to see, what could be done better. And nothing better than the spelling suggestions tool. Here in editing mode for Google Docs, it automatically comes up. If there was anything misspelled here, you would see red underlining below it, and Google would then be able to do that. So if I, for some reason, conflated the letters in conflate or left a letter out, it would go ahead, and if I use tool and then spelling, you could see that, it should. That's not a word, so Google should pick it up. Let's see. For some reason, it's not picking it up. I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't pick up the word. Let's see. I'm going to There we go. So I don't know why CNFLATE is showing up as the word in Google, but you can see it's underlined with the squiggly line that's red. We know this from Microsoft Word. And if we go into spelling, now what it does is it goes through each of the words that it thinks is misspelled, and it gives you suggestions as to how to correct that issue. Now, if, for instance, I wanted to use a special word, in the technology world, we have lots of, technical words and business things. Facebook, right, is a proper name. Those things will come up, and you can actually add them to the dictionary and say, I want to add this to my personal dictionary so that in the future you don't see it as wrong. You just know that that's a word that I use. Okay, so you can also add things. You can have it ignore for one time or ignore it all the time, or you could just go ahead and pick from the drop-down menu for it to fix the word to the proper word. So here we are. It's fixed the word conflate to its proper spelling. We can move on. Okay, so spelling is really cool here. We can go into any particular passage and we could say, oh, you know what, I'm really not sure about this Google Docs thing. What's Google Docs? Well, I can go here and click on Research under Tools, and Google will automatically search for what it is that I highlighted, and it will give me the research on the web. So I don't have to go out to Google to be able to find these things, and Google gives you the ability to go ahead and search scholarly materials, quotations, a dictionary, images, all kinds of different, silos or databases within the Google ecosystem. So instead of the Google OmniWeb search, you can actually specifically look for images. Say I only want images of Google Docs. Well, now it's looking for images of Google Docs, and there they are displayed. Okay, and so say I wanted to go ahead and import that document into my, import that image into my document. Google will automatically go ahead and do that. Again, you might be breaking copyright law here by, taking things that don't belong to you, so be aware of that. But the point is that you're capable of doing a lot of really, cool things quickly and easily by using the research functionality and correcting yourself along the way. Define, again, the easy function of define, just like typing define and then conflate into Google. I can go ahead and click on, highlight a word, click the define function under tools, and quickly you can see here that it gives me a definition. It shows me not only the verb, but it shows me the third person present, the past tense, past participle, and then the gerund form of the verb. So you're like, oh man, what's the past participle of whatever verb? You can quickly and easily find that right here in Google Docs by clicking on the define function. Okay, very, very cool. As you're writing, you want to know how many words a particular document is to keep yourself as succinct as possible. Here it tells you how many pages, how many words. In this particular case, I highlighted a word, so it's actually telling me the number of characters in that word and how many total characters are in the document. So I have 399 characters. Conflate is 8 letters or 8 characters that I've got highlighted right now, and then it tells me the characters excluding spaces if I were to, say, have highlighted more than one word. So really easy and quick to sort of see, oh, you know what, let me see how many words I have in this document and how many pages of the document it is. It does it really quickly there. Voice typing, you can quickly translate documents. So if English is not your native language, you can actually get to a first draft of it in English by using voice typing, or just typing the document in your native language and then choosing the language in which of course in this case English, choosing it from whatever language you are going to English just from the translate document. Again, you just go to tools and then translate document, and Google will use the Google Translate function to go ahead and create a new document where it's auto-translated into English or whatever language you're going to or from. So if you are writing say a blog in multiple languages and you want to quickly get it over to another language, it's not going to be written, it's not going to be translated, it's going to be transliterated in essence, but you can quickly and easily go from language to language just from clicking on the translate document button. Another point in here that's really cool is the personal dictionary. So here inside of Google, if you go to Tools and then Personal Dictionary, you can add words here that you want Google to recognize as not being incorrect or to help you correct when you type them wrong. Okay, so you can do that in here. All right, so very cool. if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and otherwise I'm going to move back over to the presentation and continue on to search engine optimization and writing well for Google and the search engines. So any questions so far about writing and editing for humans and the tools available?
We do have one question, Ray. Do you need a microphone plugged into the computer to speak text into the Google Docs?
That is correct. You'll need a current browser, so your browser will need to be its latest version most likely because of the various technology underpinnings inside the browser that are necessary. And you will need either the microphone built into your computer if one's already built in, and most laptops today are built in with a microphone and camera, and that will be more than sufficient. Or if your computer does not have a microphone, then yeah, you need to pick up a microphone or a headset, microphone headset that will have a microphone built into it. And all you have to do is plug it into the voice port, the microphone port of your computer, and you're pretty much good to go. All right? All right, so let's talk about guidelines for writing for the search engines. So this is what's typically called search engine optimization for on-page SEO. Okay, so SEO for on-page SEO. So this is writing for Google and the search engines. And what we want to do is we want to create a checklist in our mind of the things that are necessary that once we finish writing our documents, right, write for the humans first, and then we need to just give a good overview of the document, look through the document and make sure that we've applied some, not all, but some of these things, not all of them will always apply, but some of them to really get ourselves on board with what Google looks for to be able to bring traffic from the search engine results page to our websites, okay? So now that we've written this wonderful piece of prose because we wrote our bad first draft and then we've edited our second draft and got it to our third or fourth draft and it's really good, competent text now. Now we need to be able to apply the skills that we're going to learn in the next 10 minutes about what Google's looking for in order to be able to bring that traffic to your website, your blog, or what have you, okay? So the first thing is that when you're writing, you need to have one keyword or key phrase in mind for that particular page that you're writing on your website. Each individual page has only one keyword or key phrase associated with it, and that's the same for a blog post. Now that doesn't mean that you can't use other technical terms or other keywords on that page, but we want one to be the focus, okay? I can't impress upon you about this enough. One keyword or key phrase must be the focus per page or post on your website or blog, okay? So sure, if you have other key terms that you're trying to appeal to Google for, you would be writing other pages that are focused specifically on each one of those per page or post, okay? So we have to have one keyword. If I sell used cars, well, then I need to make sure that all of the various terms that people search for used cars, that over time I'm writing blog posts or pages on my website that focus on each one of those terms, okay? And we want to have one page that focuses on each one of those terms because Google looks for non-duplicate content about very specific phrases or keywords specifically. So a key phrase is a keyword, multiple keywords together as one, right? So used cars is a key phrase because it's not just, if you just typed in used into Google, people wouldn't find used cars. If I just typed in cars into Google, I'm going to find all kinds of things about cars, muscle cars that people are doing themselves, and we're going to find, Maserati dealerships, and we're going to find used car sales lots and so on and so forth, but we want to specifically hone in on just used cars, and likely used cars in your town in Virginia. So you want to actually apply the location into the key phrase for that particular page or post. So make sure that as you go through this, you've written your document now, and now you're search engine optimizing, what's that one keyword or key phrase this page or post is about? And have you already written something on your website about that? And now it's going to be considered not duplicate content, but certainly not the first time you focus this keyword or key phrase on the particular website. That's not a problem per se, but unique keyword or key phrase focuses are really important for Google, and so it should be important for you. So you should have that list of keywords and key phrases that you're consistently working down, and you're talking there could be hundreds if not thousands for your business, okay? But every time you think of a new term or a new keyword or a new question that your client has, you know, questions are really great key phrases, by the way. So you could write umpteens of blog posts just about the questions. You know, if I wrote just answers to questions, blog posts for answers for questions that people ask me, you know, in my own work, that's enough content for the rest of my career, okay? And it's probably the same for you, no matter what industry or profession you're in. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about those key phrases as being focuses for those. And what you're going to do then is you're going to apply what I'm going to talk about as we go forward, utilizing those keywords or key phrases, okay? So first and foremost is write original text, and this is where those online writing tools can really help you, because if you're copying other people's content, you're not writing original text, and Google really likes original text. All right. So as you focus on your keyword or key phrase, make sure that you're not writing the same page over and over again on your own website, because Google doesn't like that. That's not really the problem, though. It's if you copy the same exact text on a bunch of pages on your website and just create new pages from them. Okay, and I see this all the time. You know, you have a particular product or service that you provide, and there's just some little thing about it that's different, and you keep copying that same paragraph or text about how you do that thing on a lot of pages on your website. Well, Google looks at the first 200 words of every page to analyze whether or not something is original or duplicate content. So if it looks at that first 200 words and it sees that it's just all the same, then it considers it duplicate content, and then it demotes its ranking in the search engine, in the index. So you really want to make sure at least those first 200 words has what we call applying the 20% rule. 20% of every first 200 words of every page must be different. So 20% of 200 words is 20 words. I'm sorry, it's 40 words. And so 40 words need to be different in that first 200 words of text. Okay, that's not difficult. It's basically 4 sentences. All right. So you really need to think about how you're writing original text, and when you do have, say, a product or service that's different only by a color or by, you know, its location at a different venue, think about those 40-odd words that you can make different in the first 200 words to make sure that Google sees it as fundamentally different according to its 20% rule. All right? Next up is that your keywords need to show up in the headings. So I'm just going to jump over to the Untitled document I was working in before, and I'm just going to create a couple of headings. So I'm just going to write here, writing well for Google and humans, right? So this is a heading that I want in my document. Now notice here we have heading 1, 2, and 3. In HTML, which is the hypertext markup language, or the language that we write most websites in, the HTML has these things called H1, H2 through H6, okay? And that just is the size of the headings. H1 is the largest heading, H6 is the smallest heading. You really only need H1, 2, and 3 most often. This is why Google gives you H1, H2, and H3. The reason they give you heading 1, 2, and 3 is because if you were to export this document as an HTML page, which you can do, I'll show you, file, download as, Google gives you a web page. You can export it as an HTML file. Those same exact tags, H1, H2, H3, will be used for the headings, right? So in this particular case, I'm just using the menu bar here that gives me a quick option to be able to do that. And say I want something to be not so big. I don't want it to be the primary heading, so maybe I want it to be an H2, okay? What it does is it automatically styles this document for that particular, styles this line as an H2. Okay, it's a heading 2, and notice it made it bigger. It's a little bit bolder. It's it's a little bit more readable now that it's at H2. And what that does is that if, say, my key phrase was writing well for Google and humans, Well, Google looks at the H2 and says, well, Ray seems to have highlighted writing well for Google and humans. And so maybe here in the paragraph text, then I write writing well for Google and humans. And then I write more, So Google sees this repetition of the same key phrase and that key phrase in the H2 tag, right, that I've styled H2, and guess what? It connects the dots. It says, hey, Ray is writing well for Google and humans multiple times in this document, and he's actually highlighted writing well for Google and humans in the header. Well, that must be the keyword or key phrase that he's trying to focus this on. This page is probably about writing well for Google and humans, which means when someone types that into a search engine, they're more likely to find this page or document. Okay? So that's how it all works. Next, we want to write at least 200 words, and this comes back to the original text rule that Google has, original text being the 20% rule needs to be different on every page, but you need to write at least 200 words in order for Google to really give you good billing or good ranking in what's called PageRank, the ranking they use to internally tell their index which pages to render higher or lower on the search engine results page. So your web pages that have one sentence and a picture are not going to do well for Google or any of the other search engines for that matter because Google really wants at least 200 words, right? Because if I come to your website and you've got one sentence about something, I'm not going to learn deep knowledge. I'm not going to have great understanding of any topic from only one sentence. Now, if your website is a website about haiku, well, I get it. And Google likely gets that, especially if you have the word haiku all over the place. But if your website's not about haiku, then you really do need 200 words per page in order for Google to be able to rank you well. All right? The ideal is less than 600 words in a blog post and more than 300 words. So 300 to 600 words in a blog post, but pages need at least 200 words. These can be bullet points. These can be captions that appear underneath images or videos. These can be insets. These can be quotations. As long as it's highlightable text, it can be 200 words, okay? So you can have, like I said, it can be bullet points, it can be numbered lists. You don't have to write big prose, like long stayed prose that people have to, sort of meander their way through. But it has to have 200 words, which is really great because if you write the document in Google Docs originally, then Google Docs will automatically tell you how many words there are, and that way it can give you a quick, sort of indication of how long the document is. You get to your 200-word mark, you know that you're good. Now you can clean up the text and get it a little bit further along to that 300 mark by explaining some of the parts, and you're good to go. Okay, next up is text stylings on keywords matter. So as I was talking about before, the headings are one way in which we quote-unquote apply styles like bold, italics, or underline to keywords. So some of the text stylings we have available on the web are bold, italics, underline, and hyperlinking. Okay, so it's really important for you to pay attention to the stylings that you're doing and that the stylings actually style the keywords or key phrases that you want. So going back to that original document, I would want to go ahead and place maybe making writing well for Google and humans. I would actually italicize that because it's the proper name of the webinar we're doing, and that would indicate by connecting that back up to the header, heading 2 that I created, it would tell Google that I'm writing about that topic. Okay? So it's very simple, but you just have to make sure that you're doing those things so that Google is capable of paying attention to them and driving the traffic to you. All right? So I know we're running out of time, so I want to give us a little bit of time for Q&A. I'm sure that there are questions. If there are not, then we'll close out, and you can feel free to email me your questions after that. So I'll hand it over to Tracy for questions and close out and so on and so forth.
Well, Ray, you've done a great job. We don't have any questions right now, so I'll go ahead and close out. And if you have any questions, if you want to type those in the window as I'm doing a little bit of housekeeping, you can go ahead and do that. Thank you all for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded and it'll be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow, you'll receive an email on the webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in the email. Please help us to continue and improve our webinars by filling out the evaluation. I also just posted that in the chat window if you want to go ahead and fill it out now. We will see you all on October 15th, hopefully, for our next webinar in the series, A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words on Google. So there are a couple of questions. Are the section 3 tools that you went over, are those available in Word?
So I believe that Grammarly and Ginger both have functions available within Office suites like a Microsoft Word or LibreOffice, which is the open source equivalent. But I'm not exactly sure about that. So if you, I will, once we archive this, I'll put in the show notes in the description whether or not there is one. I can, just my memory is failing me at the moment, but I'm almost certain that both of them have components that work with Microsoft Word, but I'm just misremembering whether one of them is actually a function built into the mobile version of Microsoft Word and not the desktop version. But either way, there is one of them likely has a function for it. I know Ginger definitely uses the web browser extension, and so that's if you're using Microsoft and 365 or the cloud version basically of Microsoft Office, it'll definitely work because it's looking at the text on the page that you're writing.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, Ray, the person clarified their question. She said, no, I mean the headers, titles, title 1, word count, etc.
Are the tools looking at those?
I'm not sure. Helen, if you would go ahead and clarify that question slightly, maybe we can do a better job of answering it.
Yeah, so in general, the search engine stuff that I talked about, Google is not looking at, and so the tools are looking at any of the text in the body of a document. They're not going to look at the like if you titled the document, that untitled document I created, it's not going to look at the title of the document, but it will look at everything that's in the physical body. The literal body of the document that you're working in. So the header, the headings that I typed in, anything that I can type in, it will look at that. I hope that helps.
Okay, so another question, do the Google features you discussed, such as Title 1, word count, etc., exist in Word? And she's got Word capitalized, so because you were using Google Docs versus Word.
Right. So I was just giving you an example of doing these for writing online. I'm not going to talk about the desktop version of my Microsoft Office, but on the online version of Microsoft Office, there is at least the spelling and grammar check in there. Microsoft doesn't have a voice typing feature, and nor does it have the research functionalities that I talked about. It's not the same. I mean, they have the ability to search and Bing and those kinds of things, but it's not going to give you the same clear-cut responses of research in Google Scholar or research databases or images or those kinds of things. You have to do a little bit more grunt work in order to get those things. Google Docs makes it just much more seamless. But if you're using Microsoft Office 365 in the cloud, there is spelling and grammar check built into the Microsoft platform.
We answered her question.
Great.
And there are no more questions, so we'll go